Welcome to the Physical Ability Test for entry-level firefighters. This physical ability test was developed and validated with 41 departments in Southern California. The purpose of this test is to provide one standard that can be used with the 41 departments involved in the project. The test was designed to identify qualified candidates who can meet the physical demands of a firefighter. The Physical Ability Test is a work sample test designed to simulate tasks performed by firefighters during fire suppression operations or other emergency situations. The tasks which constitute the Physical Ability Test were identified as critical and important by hundreds of incumbent firefighters. The equipment, weights, and distances used in the events were also determined from firefighter survey responses. The Physical Ability Test is comprised of 11 continuously timed test events. Your score will consist of the total time taken to perform all 11 events. See a proctor or test administrator to find out the time in which you must complete all 11 events. The Physical Ability Test is a strenuous, physically demanding activity. It requires a significant amount of both strength and endurance to complete. We strongly recommend that you consult with a physician before participating in the test. Before taking the Physical Ability Test, you will need to know some basic information. You must arrive at the testing site at least 15 minutes before your assigned test time in comfortable athletic clothes and tennis shoes. You must sign a liability waiver prior to the test. You will not be allowed to take the test if you have not turned in your liability form. Please remember to drink plenty of water during the testing process. You are not allowed to run between test events. However, you may run safely within each event. You will be provided with a turnout coat, helmet, gloves, and breathing apparatus. If you have any questions about how to wear the equipment, ask the test proctor prior to the exam. It is your responsibility to ensure that you are wearing all the appropriate equipment prior to taking the test. You have the option to bring your own turnout coat, helmet, and structure firefighting gloves. If you do bring your own equipment, it must be checked and approved by a proctor before you take the exam. If you do not get your equipment checked prior to the exam, you will be disqualified and your test time will be invalid. You will not be allowed to take the exam without all the necessary equipment. If you have any questions about the exam, ask a test proctor prior to taking the test. Now let's review the test events. Event 1 is the dry hose drag. This event simulates deploying a hose line from a transverse hose bed to the scene of a fire. When performing this event, candidates should place the hose nozzle over their shoulders and onto their chests. It is important for candidates to lean their way forward when performing the event. Candidates may run safely during the dry hose drag. When deploying the hose around the obstacles, candidates will be required to overshoot or go past the obstacle and touch the designated area on the course before making the turn. This will reduce the friction on the hose and make it easier to deploy. At the completion of the event, candidates are required to place the end of the hose in the designated area. If the end of the hose is not placed within the designated area, candidates will be asked to go back and set the nozzle in the appropriate place. Event 2 is the charged hose drag. This event simulates extending a supply line into a hot and smoky environment to supply water for firefighting operations. When performing this event, candidates should place the hose nozzle over their shoulders and onto their chests. It is important for candidates to lean their way forward when performing the event. Candidates may run safely during the charged hose drag. When deploying the hose past the obstacle, candidates will be required to overshoot or go past the obstacle and touch the designated area on the course before making the turn. This will once again reduce the friction on the hose and make it easier to deploy. At the completion of the event, candidates are required to place the end of the hose in the designated area. If the end of the hose is not placed within the designated area, candidates will be asked to go back and set the nozzle in the appropriate place. After successful completion of the charged hose drag, candidates should walk to the next event. Event 3 is the HALYARD raise. This event simulates extending the fly section of a ladder in order to access higher floors for rescue, ventilation, and other firefighting operations. Candidates are required to brace one foot against the base of the ladder, also known as footing the ladder. If candidates do not properly foot the ladder, they will be asked to lower the ladder and begin the event again. Candidates may use one of two methods for raising the extension ladder. Candidates may use a thumbs up, hand over hand raise, or a thumbs down, hand over hand raise. Candidates are allowed to use a two-handed method to begin the raise, but must continue the event with a hand over hand technique. Candidates are not allowed to jump up and grasp the halyard. Both feet must remain on the ground at all times. Candidates are not allowed to crouch down and use their lower body to perform the raise. If the rope slips through the candidate's hands during the halyard raise, the candidate must restart the event from the beginning. If the rope slips through the candidate's hands a second time during the halyard raise, the candidate is disqualified from the test. After successful completion of the halyard raise, the candidate should once again walk to the next event. Event 4 is the roof walk. This event simulates walking on a roof ladder with appropriate equipment for ventilation purposes. Candidates are required to touch every rung on the way up the ladder with at least 1 foot, including the rung near the top of the ladder, designated with tape or paint. If candidates skip rungs on the way up the ladder, they will be required to start the event from the beginning. Candidates are not required to touch every rung on the way down the ladder. Candidates must back down the ladder in a manner that is comfortable and safe. Candidates are not allowed to turn around and walk down the ladder. If candidates fail to back down the ladder, they will be required to start the event from the point at which they turned forward. Candidates are allowed to slide the chainsaw along the roof when backing down the ladder, or candidates may also carry the chainsaw when backing down the ladder. The chainsaw must be returned to the designated area after completion of the event. If candidates do not return the chainsaw to the designated area, they will be asked to put it in the proper place before going on to the next event. Event 5 is the attic crawl. This event simulates searching for the extension of a fire in a confined space with restricted heights and joisted walkways, such as an attic. Candidates are required to pick up the simulated flashlight and proceed across the attic prop, staying below the barriers. Candidates must either crawl on their hands and knees across the attic prop, or candidates may crab walk on their hands and feet as long as they stay below the barriers. Candidates must place the simulated flashlight in the designated area to signify the completion of the event. If a candidate knocks over a barrier, the proctor will reset the barrier and the candidate will restart the event from the beginning. After successful completion of the attic crawl, the candidates should walk to the next event. Event 6 is the ventilation exercise. This event simulates making a ventilation opening on a roof in order to ventilate a fire. Candidates will pick up the sledgehammer from the designated area. Candidates can either place 1 foot on the footrest provided, or stand closer to the strike area if desired. For each strike, the candidates are required to raise the sledgehammer above their helmet and strike the roof while maintaining control of the sledgehammer. The following are examples of 2 methods that may be used by candidates. In the first method, candidates may place both hands at the bottom of the sledgehammer for each strike. In the second method, candidates can slide their top hand to the top of the sledgehammer and back down to the bottom of the sledgehammer for each strike while swinging the hammer in a roundhouse motion. Both methods require the sledgehammer to be brought above the helmet on every strike. The number of strikes will be counted out loud by the proctor during the event. Improper strikes will not be counted. An improper strike is one that is not raised above the helmet, or one in which control of the sledgehammer is not maintained at all times. If the sledgehammer is brought above the helmet and then simply allowed to fall back down to the prop, the candidate is not maintaining control of the sledgehammer. After performing the strikes, the sledgehammer should be placed in the designated area. If the candidates do not return the sledgehammer to the designated area, they will be asked to return it to the proper place before going to the next event. Event 7 is the victim removal. This event simulates removing an injured or unconscious victim from a hazardous area. There are several methods that may be used during the event. Candidates may grab the dummy underneath the arms, lift the torso of the dummy off the ground, and drag the dummy around the course. Candidates may also grab the dummy over the arms, lift the torso of the dummy off the ground, and drag the dummy around the course. Candidates may grab the dummy by 1 or 2 arms and drag the dummy around the course, and lastly, candidates may carry the dummy, although this method is the most time-consuming and strenuous. Candidates may not drag the dummy by the head, feet, or clothes. Regardless of the method used, candidates must move the dummy completely around the course and place the dummy back in the starting position. After successful completion of the victim removal, candidates should walk to the next event. Event 8 is the ladder removal and carry. This event simulates removing an extension ladder from an apparatus, carrying the ladder to the site of use, and replacing the ladder back on the apparatus. There are 3 methods that may be used when completing this event: the high shoulder carry, the low shoulder carry, and the suitcase carry. With all methods, candidates should begin by finding the balance point of the ladder. Rungs in the middle of the ladder, which should provide the best balance point, will be marked. The first method is the high shoulder carry. In the high shoulder carry, the entire ladder sits on the top of the candidate's shoulder. Candidates may place the ladder directly on their shoulder from the mounted hooks and proceed around the designated area, replacing the ladder on the hooks directly from the shoulders. The second method is the low shoulder carry. In the low shoulder carry, the top beam of the ladder sits on the top of the candidate's shoulder. Candidates may place the ladder directly on their shoulder from the mounted hooks and proceed around the designated area, replacing the ladder on the hooks directly from their shoulder. The third method is the suitcase carry. In this method, the top beam of the ladder is held in one arm like a suitcase. If, in the proctor's opinion, the candidate loses control of the ladder, the proctor may intervene. The proctor will take the ladder from the candidate, placing it on the ground at the place where the candidate lost control. The candidate can then pick the ladder up in any fashion and continue. When replacing the ladder, both ends of the ladder must be in control and off of the ground. If one end of the ladder hits the ground during replacement, the proctor will assist the candidate in grounding the ladder, and the candidate will then be required to replace it properly. The ladder must be replaced on the hooks in the original position. There will be rungs painted on the ladder to assist candidates in this process. If the ladder is not replaced in the original position, candidates will be required to remove the ladder and replace it in the proper position. Candidates are not allowed to lean or brace the ladder against the wall during replacement. If candidates lean the ladder against the wall, they will be required to remove the ladder and replace it properly. While performing this event, candidates are allowed 2 penalties. A penalty includes any of the following: when the candidates drop the ladder, when candidates lose control of the ladder and the proctor assists in grounding, when candidates voluntarily ground the ladder to gain stability, and lastly, when the ladder falls over the head of the candidate with the candidate's head between ladder rungs. In this case, the proctor will assist in the removal and grounding of the ladder. If a third penalty occurs, candidates will be disqualified. After successful completion of the event, candidates should once again walk to the next event. Event 9 is the stair climb with hose. This event simulates climbing stairs with a hose bundle to aid the extinguishment of a multiple-story fire. There are 2 ways in which the hose bundle may be carried. Candidates may put the hose bundle over their left or right shoulder and proceed up the stairs, or candidates may carry the hose bundle in their arms, although this method is not the most efficient. Candidates may skip steps on the way to the 4th floor. On the 4th floor, candidates are required to place the hose bundle in the designated area. The next event begins on the landing of the 4th floor. Event 10 is the crawling search. This event simulates searching for victims in a smoky or toxic environment. Candidates are required to crawl on their hands and knees around the platform of the 4th floor. After completing the crawl, candidates must pick up the hose bundle and return to the ground floor. Candidates are not allowed to skip steps on the way down the stairs. If candidates fail to touch a step with their foot, they will be required to go back and touch that step before proceeding down the stairs. At the ground floor, candidates must place the bundle in the designated area. Event 11 is the stair climb with air bottles and the hose hoist. This event simulates climbing stairs with air bottles to aid the extinguishment of a multiple-story fire and hoisting a hose line or other equipment up a multiple-story building with a rope. Candidates must pick up 2 air bottles connected at the neck with a strap and place the air bottles over their left or right shoulder. Candidates may skip steps on their way to the 3rd floor. At the 3rd floor, candidates must place the air bottles in the designated area. Next, candidates go to the balcony rail where they will be hooked up to a safety line. Candidates will hoist an extended hose line up and over the balcony rail. When the hose nozzle is hoisted over the balcony, candidates must place the nozzle in the designated area on the platform. Candidates may not rub the rope or hose along the balcony rail. If candidates do rub the rope or hose along the rail, they will be given a warning. If the candidate continues to rub the rope or hose along the balcony rail, the candidate will be disqualified. This rule does not apply when placing the hose nozzle in the designated area. The hose will inevitably rub against the balcony rail at this time. If the candidate drops the rope or hose while hoisting the hose, the candidate can continue the event and immediately try again. After successfully hoisting the hose line, the candidate will pick up the air bottles and return to the ground floor. Candidates are not allowed to skip steps on the way down the stairs. If candidates fail to touch a step with their foot, they will be required to go back and touch that step before proceeding back down the stairs. At the ground floor, candidates will cross the finish line with the air bottles. The test time will stop after the candidate has crossed the finish line. After you have completed the test, return all equipment to a test proctor. Also, remember that it is important to take the time for a proper cool down, such as walking for a brief period, instead of immediately sitting down. If you feel that you are in need of any medical attention, notify a proctor immediately. This concludes our presentation on the physical ability test. We wish you all the best of luck, and remember, see a physician before participating in the physical ability test.